Hey everyone, and we are live. Hashtag SPSM chat 2.0 reboot is back again for the third week. My name is Anne Marie Matulis. I am not April Foreman. I hope you're all getting a little used to that anyway. And tonight we have an interesting program that kind of wraps around a project that we've been working on for almost 5.5 years. And I wanted to respond to a back tweet that our back channel email I got. No, you do not have to be from Massachusetts to be on the SPSM chat. Starting a new project, one of the things I learned a long time ago was start with what you're familiar with, and it will be easier. So that's why we started with Impacted Family and Friends. Last week's program was not something I'm terribly familiar or comfortable with, for sure. Social justice, but it was a great learning lesson. And tonight, yeah, this is very familiar. This is part 2 of that first chat for Impacted Family and Friends. So before we get started, I'd like, I'm trying to think if there is any more housekeeping. Please not forget your hashtag SPSM with all of your tweets and retweets so we can track them in the Wakelet later. I hope you've all been catching up on the fact that the Wakelet gets posted maybe about an hour after the chat shuts down. And the YouTube video last week was again available about an hour after the chat stopped. And I posted it in several different places. So let me know if you didn't get those, because I can post the links again later tonight. So I would like to have our guest introduce you, because they're going to do most of the talk about this. So Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Nemkovic. I am from Fall River, Massachusetts. I'm a member of the Bristol County Regional Coalition for Suicide Prevention. I got involved in suicide prevention back in 2002 after losing my sister Susan to suicide. And so since then, I've been an advocate for suicide prevention, suicide awareness, and upon moving up to New England about 6 years ago, connected with this group and have become a facilitator for the kitchen table conversation for suicide loss survivors. Have also been involved in the Weaving a Tapestry of Hope series and in several of the Light the Way walks in this area.
Steve.
Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Palm. I'm from Taunton, Massachusetts. I live here with my wife and my son. I've been involved with the Bristol County Regional Suicide Prevention Coalition for 3 years now. On July 17th, 2014, I lost my daughter, Casey, to suicide. She was 14 years old. Toughest thing I've ever gone through. Something I'm going to live with for the rest of my life. And I've been volunteering because I need to do something with the grief that's inside me and turn it around into something positive. And our coalition is doing a lot of positive work. A title that I've been given by Anne Marie. I am now the chairperson of the Casey Palm Project for Youth Suicide Prevention. We've got a couple things going on with that I'll mention later. I do fundraising. Actually, through my job, I'm able to do a lot of fundraising for my coworkers. They've really stepped up and helped us out. I have received a grant from my company, UPS, and we're hoping to get some more money from them this year. And that's it for now.
Tracey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracey Medeiros, suicide attempt survivor and loss survivor. I currently work as a certified peer specialist at a crisis unit locally here in Massachusetts. I got started with Anne Marie one day. She asked me what I was doing for the rest of my life. And of course, I had to say, what? So, and this is how I got here. So.
All right. So what I'm going to do is a really, really brief overview, a real composite overview of what we're talking about tonight. If you had a chance to read the blog earlier today, then you know what some of the background is. We were in production, and this is the part 2 from 2 weeks ago. We were in production for A Voice at the Table, documentary call to action for suicide attempt survivors. And towards the end of 2013, it became obvious that the 4 suicide attempt survivors who were sharing had a common thread going through, and that is when they each reached out initially, not just for the clinical help after the crisis, but further down the path, there was no support programs out there. There were no peer support groups. They couldn't find, not workshops, not anything. And so I said to Tracey at the time, because she was one of the people in that documentary, you know, maybe we should do something about that. And she just sort of like walked away and said, yeah, I want no part of that. And I kept pestering her about it because I could write the curriculum, but I'm not a suicide attempt survivor, and it needed that voice to it. And so she finally said yes, and we worked together to put together this manual, a workshop manual. And it had to be revised God knows how many times. I lost count. At first it was this big, and then we managed to get it down to something more manageable. We launched, just as we were ready to do something with it, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts issued an RFP, and you don't usually see the word innovative and grant in the same sentence, but that's what they were looking for. They were looking for innovative programs for attempt survivors and loss survivors. So they were looking to extend the support system out there. And so it was awesome because there were 4 of the grants, of 22 grants awarded, 4 of them were for programs for suicide attempt survivors. So yay, Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Public Health. We took the different road. 3 of them were more clinical. They were looking for people right out of crisis, and that is so important. But because we had been doing the documentary, I was looking at the group that needed the support further down the path. And so that's what we did. And it was in the beginning exclusive to attempt survivors. About a year into the workshop process that we had, it was running 5-6 months, once a month. Some loss survivors further along their healing path said, well, can we do that? And I said, sure. And we had 2 separate groups going. One night before the workshops were supposed to start, everybody was sitting at one table, and it was no one's great idea. It certainly wasn't in the design of the workshop. We never separated from the table. So the attempt and loss survivors stayed at the table together. And from that point forward, it was like, well, why move? So that brings us up to where we are now, 5.5 years down the path of having worked on this. This is an evidence-based project. It's more casual and outside the box and feet on the street than perhaps a structured clinical workshop would be, but that's what people asked for. So we supplied what they said they needed. We have taken this across the country in presentations. Tracey will probably refer to that later. But in the last year, we were in Washington, D.C. at AAS. We were talking about it. We've been doing that for the last 3 years. We've been out to Bridging the Divide a couple of times over the last couple of years in Colorado. We went to Maryland twice. We were down at Frederick Community College this past fall, setting the foundation to bring the R&R down there, because that's what we call it. When we started this wellness check workshop, it had a name that was this long. And you couldn't spit it out. There was no an acronym that was like and so we just finally narrowed it down to R&R. We went to Missouri this summer, and I want a huge shout out to Jackie Christmas and Kara Bland and the Department of Mental Health in Missouri, because they are hosting this workshop series in Missouri. They've already started that. So if you're out there in the world, you say, well, where can I go to get one? Right now, Massachusetts and Missouri, that's a bit of a drive either way you go. But we're hoping to expand. That's one of the projects. This is also a major project of a very larger impacted family program that A Voice at the Table is working in collaboration with the American Association of Suicidology. So you'll be seeing some materials coming out from there. Now, I'm going to stop at that point, and I think we've covered everything. I hope you're all saying hello and telling us where you're from, and some other stuff out there on Twitter. Some fun things, you know, some cool stuff that maybe we wouldn't know about it. And Trace, you ready to kick it off?
Yeah, it's
All right.
making time.
Go for it.
Everybody, I shared at our teen center in 2009 at our first International Law Survivors Day event, and I listened to Rosie Walzever, a suicide law survivor, share her heartbreaking story of losing her 20-year-old son to suicide. And although the teen center was crowded, I felt as though that Rosie and I were the only ones in the gym. I could hardly breathe. For the first time in my life, I understood the full scope of devastation a loss survivor experiences. I couldn't stop crying. I realized I almost did that to my family. And for the first time since my attempt 8 years before, I said, I am a suicide attempt survivor out loud. It was a turning point in my healing and wellness. It was life-changing for sure. So when we're talking about improving our healing journey, how does that happen at our table? What does a wellness check workshop look like? What does it feel like? Well, it's a little bit of CBT, a splash of DBT, and a touch of 12-step modality. First and foremost, it's all peer-to-peer. I had no idea how much we all had in common with the day-to-day living stuff. And we can only learn that by sitting together, talking about the topics and the issues, the same ones. The first exercise we do is Dreams Matter. I won't go into all the details and items in that exercise, but one is that you're guided to create a wicked, awesome wish list. Everybody at the table had a dream that they had pushed aside because of suicide. The loss survivors sometimes just stopped following their dreams, and the attempt survivors talked about doing the same thing. Same issues, different causes, same emotions hanging over our lives. We call them the unfinished symphonies. It's really cool to watch this conversation unfold around the table. And that's why we began to call it the Wicked Awesome Wish List. Everyone needs to have one. Those at the table shared how grateful they were to be able to talk about this stuff with peers. Not only were we sharing our own lived experience with other attempt survivors, we all recognized that the loss survivors at the table felt the same way about their unfulfilled dreams. We had a common bond. The family around the table expanded. We also found common ground when we began the exercises that focused on anger, the sandbox, control does not equal love, and the hardest for everyone, forgiveness. Talking about anger sets up a list that is almost identical, no matter where you fit. Angry at ourselves for not handling things better, angry at our family for not being more supportive through either crisis attempt or a loss. Angry at the doctors for not taking us more seriously. It's about healthy coping skills, and that is universal. It applies to everyone. But those monthly discussions help us take our own inventory about honestly evaluating how well we're doing or not doing emotionally. And the value in doing this together is that, one, we don't feel different from others or isolated, and two, in the process of the discussion, we hear the lived experience of each other and can pick up tips that we can use ourselves. We sincerely believe that this Blended Hearts project can be helpful to many, many more attempt survivors and loss survivors further along the healing path. Hey, Steve, it's your turn, bud.
Thank you, Tracy. I found that when I at first suffered my loss, I didn't do anything for a while. And a couple months after my daughter passed, I started going on the computer and looking for resources. I honestly was looking for somebody with the same exact loss as me. I was looking for somebody who lost their 14-year-old daughter, and I didn't find that, but I did find some support groups. That nothing was near my house. Nothing was convenient. There was nothing really in our area. And about a year after my daughter passed, we found the Light the Way Walk, which was right in our city of Taunton. And my wife and I had T-shirts done, and we decided we were going to raise money and do what we could to help with suicide prevention. And that's how I got started with the coalition. I discovered they had some grief support, the kitchen table grief support group, and it helped me tremendously to be able to sit at a table and just talk with other people who've had a loss. It was a big release, and it was something I really needed it, and I continue to go, even if it's to support somebody else. Maybe if I've had a bad month, I still have bad months, bad days, bad weeks, and it helps me out tremendously. It's definitely a release. Well, one day Tracey was in there. Tracey would usually, I'd see Tracey. I was about to start, and Tracey would leave the room. Well, this one particular night I showed up, and Tracey had just begun sharing with another person about her suicide attempt. And as I sat there and listened to her story, she said the words, "I was not thinking about my family when I made my attempt." And something that I really struggled with was, how could my daughter have done this? I know she loved me. She knows I loved her. How could she do this? That was a gift that Tracey gave me. Those words helped me tremendously. And with that, we now work together. We volunteer together, and we do community conversations for suicide prevention, where we share our stories. And Kathy is also a part of this. But the three of us will stand up in front of people, and we share our stories of loss, of surviving, of our hopes. It's the fact that I guess I mistakenly came in at the right time, and because we work together and we listen to each other, it's something that's it's tough to explain that how much it has helped me. Where if I just was talking with loss survivors all the time, that would be great too. But I feel I learn more with an attempt survivor at the table. Last year, the three of us got to present in front of the Massachusetts State Suicide Prevention Conference, and in front of 500 people. And for me, that was nerve-wracking, but it felt so good to share what we've learned by working together. Mm. Mm-hmm. We feel we can help people by doing what we're doing and sharing what we've learned. We had a conversation yesterday in town, and we talk about this, and it's people are receptive to it. They do think it's a good idea that when we explain what it's done for us, Tracey, Kathy, and I think people see this when we do talk about it. Losing my daughter it's still a struggle every day. It's always on my mind. Working with Tracey, Kathy, and Anne-Marie, it's such a help for me. It's I actually get excited when I know we're going to go out and speak to somebody and share our story. Mm-hmm. It's uplifting. It's when my daughter passed, I could feel my shoulders shrugged, and I walked down, and it's when we're going to help somebody and talk about our stories. I feel stronger. It makes me feel stronger. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm going to pass it off to Kathy.
Thanks, Steve. So I think my sister died back in 2002. So back then, and I can honestly say, even I think until the time that I met Tracey, I never even heard of the words attempt survivor. I let alone know one of them. And so when I first met Tracey, she was Anne-Marie's sidekick a couple of years ago. And, you know, Tracey came and I knew she was an attempt survivor. But the thought of sitting down at a table talking to her just never, us engaging in a conversation about suicide from our two different sides, just never, I never even thought of that until the one night at our kitchen table conversation meeting in Fall River. Tracey came with Anne-Marie, and we were talking, and Tracey wasn't saying anything. She was just, you know, listening. And some question came up. I think it was the ultimate why question. And I think Tracey kind of looked at Anne-Marie, and Anne-Marie gave her the signal, like, because I kept saying, I finally just looked at Tracey, and I was really nervous. I thought, I'm crossing a line here, but like, why? And that's when Tracey started to talk to us about what she was thinking at the time. And it was just, it was a life-changing moment for me. I thought I was, you know, I knew everything from the books that I had read and from, you know, different things that, you know, people have printed in newspapers and all these professionals and all that. But this was a real life one-to-one conversation with an attempt survivor, which to me just took me to a whole different level of understanding about, you know, what my sister may have been going through. And it was, to me, it was like one last conversation with my sister. And it was enlightening. It helped to fill in a lot of the blanks for me. Things that, like I said, I don't think anyone who hasn't been through it would know. And so from that moment on, I realized how beneficial it is for to look at this from both sides. You know, speaking with an attempt survivor is, it puts an end to some of the myths that are out there that, or speculations, and it just, it's real. And for that, I just think it has taken us, like I said, to a whole different level of understanding. I love being at a table with Tracey, with Steve, with others who have gone through this situation, and from different angles, though, because it just helps for a lot of questions to be answered, and to see things from different points of view. And I applaud all of this efforts. It has been so enlightening for me. It's been so helpful to me on my journey through the grief process. You know, Tracey just telling, you know, her story has, I just think that's wonderful. I think it's brought so much to the table. It's opened up so many eyes. I know me personally, it's helped me tremendously in terms of suicide prevention. One of the things I've always got frustrated with Tracey once, because she was talking about her journey and how no one was asking the right questions. And I said, Tracey, I asked my sister all the time if she was okay. So don't tell me And Tracey was like, well, that's not the right question. And so I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot that the right question is, are we talking suicide here? Do you have a plan? And the importance of knowing that comes from an attempt survivor, telling their story, telling what would have made a difference in their life. All of the questions I think a lot of us loss survivors would have loved to have asked of the loved one that we did lose.
Kathy, before we switch over, do you have your takeaways there?
Yes.
Could you read those out for us?
Sure.
So let me just set it up. So everyone, when we've been doing this workshop in local process for 5.5 years, and then for the last couple of years, we have been bringing it to our state conference. And so 2 years ago, we did a workshop, just one of the normal workshops you go to any convention. And wow, the room was packed. The room was packed, and the feedback was incredible. And we thought, well, thank you. That's really nice. And we went off about our business. And last year, 2018, we didn't submit a workshop for it, and because we felt we'd made the statement, we had presented this now for 3 years in a row at our state conference, so that people kind of knew what we were doing, we thought, and we were asked if we would do the plenary session at our 2018 conference. So our conference is broken into 2 days. We have 500 people each day. Bart Andrews was one of our keynote speakers this year. Coming up in 2019, April Foreman's coming out to be one of our keynotes. But at the plenary session, I was stunned. I really was. You could have heard a pin drop. There were 500 people in the room, and it was like nobody was breathing. And when it was all over and done, with the standing ovation, we all got mobbed by people. And I have to say this because I wouldn't be being totally honest. A part of me was saying, we've been doing this for 5 years. Now, all of a sudden, you've noticed it, and I don't say that in arrogance or conceit, because I know how many people, especially in the field of suicide prevention, have gone through this, that you're saying the same thing over and over and over, and presenting, and you think people have heard that. So we got inundated with requests to bring it in other places across the state. But one of the things that really hit home to everybody was what Kathy calls her takeaways. So Kathy, can you share those and see how that generates, maybe that will generate some Twitter chat?
Sure. So hearing true actual stories from attempt survivors provides information about suicide that eliminates a lot of myths. To me personally, it makes me want to fight harder to educate the public about why people die by suicide and how we can work to prevent suicide. My hope is that we can bring loss survivors and attempt survivors together for several reasons. One, to help in the healing process for both sides, enlightening each other, helping each other to fill in some of the blanks, bring support to each other. Two, use the knowledge gained in support program education and training. Three, use the knowledge gained as a means to develop education and training around suicide prevention and awareness, starting as early as kindergarten. Four, work together to eliminate a lot of the myths that create much of the stigma that still exists.
Trace, you want to pick that up? Anything you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah. I just want to say that it's through our stories that we can reach in and touch someone's heart and give them hope to not give up. When Bart Andrews, he was one of our keynote speakers in 2018 at our state conference, as Anne Marie said. He stressed that it was past time that we look at new ways to address suicide, to help save lives. But it's not just about keeping people alive. It's about really improving the quality of our lives. And we sincerely believe that our peer-to-peer self-care projects can do that, because what we really do is share our stories, and we share from the heart. And ideally, to know to really end suicides, we need attempt survivors, loss survivors, and family members impacted all at one table, working together, talking with each other, staying connected to create an army of support for others and ourselves.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Steve, you heard what Kathy said, as young as kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yes.
How about you share one of your projects?
So one of the things that we're working on through the Casey Palm Project for Youth Suicide Prevention is we're purchasing some emotional wellness series of children's books to be used from age 0 to 7. So these are books that you read like a Dr. Seuss book, but it's going to help a child learn to understand their emotions. It's going to be a book that a new parents can read to their newborns, and as they grow, they can and learn to read. They can read themselves. I have some of them right in front of me, Emery. I'm gonna
Cool.
right here.
Oh, yeah.
You see that? All right. And I just want to read the back of this one right here. It says,
Sure.
Imagine what would happen if our children were empowered from the earliest ages to understand their emotions. What if they were taught positive words to use daily, along with strategies to help them manage their emotions? What if all of these lessons could start as early, this says 2 in here, 2 years of age, but when they start reading on their own? So we're going to distribute those books, and there's some videos that are going to be coming out shortly to go along with them. And we're going to try to get some feedback on the people that are given the books to see what they think of them, and think if it will help. Each book begins with a page or two to the parents to tell you exactly what emotion it's about. But once you read the book and you understand what it's trying to teach a child, and I'm really excited about this. I have to mention, I mentioned this last night when we had a town hall conversation. Just within a 12-mile radius of my house, in the past 3 months, we lost a 14-year-old boy, an 11-year-old boy, and just last week, 10 miles from my house, was a 14-year-old girl that took her own life. And one of the things I said last night to the people that were there, I says, how do we reach these kids? How do we reach them before it gets to that point?
Mm-hmm.
And we start as young as possible. That's so they understand what's the emotions that are going through their head. A teenager, they're full of hormones, and they have so much. There's so much outside influence and social media, and it's not easy growing up these days with all the feedback and the social media does not make it easier. But I'm very excited about these books. I believe we're going to be giving some to the local elementary schools shortly. Is that correct, Anne-Marie? Yep.
Yes, you are.
All right. And my daughter, I know my daughter was looking down right now, and she's proud of the work that's being done. And I'm very, very excited to be part of this group. It's the work that's being done is just tremendous. And I am so glad to, even under the circumstances that I've met these people that I get to work with.
Thank you, Kathy.
So,
you have a town hall meeting coming up.
yes.
Why?
And, why? Well, I think in the community, I know myself and several people I know are frustrated that we always seem to get the right people in the room after the fact. We're always reactive instead of proactive. And so we thought that we need to take a stance, get the right people around the table, whether it be civic leaders, educators, parents, anyone affected by suicide in some way, come together. Let's talk about what educational and informational resources are available today and how does one get access to them, and then what are the resources that are still needed and how can we make them happen. And so just really in the last couple of days, I'm just tired of always seeing after you hear of someone dying by suicide, there's a group of people that come together to discuss what are we going to do about the program, and which is great, but their interest is as long as, the next shiny little item comes by or the next news story comes by, and then they're off on some other tangent. And I really hope that we can, as a collaborative group, make this a regular conversation, that this is on everyone's agenda, that we're more proactive instead of reactive. And let's save a life instead of talking about, how do we cope after someone has died. I'd much rather talk about the former than the later.
Okay.
It's February 16th at 9:30 a.m. in Fall River at Blessed Trinity Parish on Plymouth Avenue, 9:30 to noon. So we've already heard from 2 of our state representatives that they'll be here. Already heard from some of our school board members that they will be here. So we're going to really try to get the word out and get as many people as we can here. It's a start.
It's a start. It's a good start.
Yep.
So I wanted to bring us back to the whole process of the re-energize and reconnect. So what you just heard, since I've had the privilege and the honor of sort of sitting to the sidelines, watching this trio of people interact and grow and develop themselves, that with the re-energize and reconnect, Tracey is always talking about, and I think you mentioned it already, Tracey, that the ultimate goal, just taking that cue from Bart Andrews, that ultimate goal is we need to find outside the box, innovative ways to be able to help people not get to the point of suicide. But that, I'm a trainer and I'm an educator, so I have to share with you in the co-developer of this re-energize and reconnect. But while the ultimate goal of the R&R is suicide prevention, we spend so much time talking about that, and we don't talk a whole lot or focus a whole lot on improving the quality of life. And that's really what this workshop is all about, the series, because as again, repeating what the exercises are, Tracey's, she turned the phrase, the wicked awesome wish list. But it was so just surprising to me that the commonality of emotions, although different causes, between attempt and loss survivors sitting at the table talking about those unfinished symphonies, still had the same emotional impact on them. That sense of not finishing something, the sense of angst of not being able to do something we wanted to do. And I can tell you that also spills over to substance abuse people who begin to get sober or get clean from drugs and maybe no longer have depressive attitudes and no longer have suicidal attitudes, that you pick your head up at one point and you say, wow, and all this went by. and there's that sense of regret, and that kind of regret can lead to back into depression. So one of the things that is awesome to see with the Re-Energize and Reconnect is we encourage people to step up and do things. Tracey's first workshop that she coordinated, we had 5 suicide attempt survivors who did not know each other. And we gave them the challenge. They had to do something and bring it back the next month. So for the 3 of you, what's one of the, think about it for a second. What is one of the most important things that you've taken away from, even if you've already said it, just to reaffirm it, what is one of the most important things you've taken away on a positive note about having attempt survivors and loss survivors at the table? And I need to stress, I don't know if we've said it often enough to the audience, we are talking about people who are further along the healing path. Kathy facilitates a grief support for suicide loss in Fall River. I facilitate a grief support here in Taunton, and we have another grief support session in Attleboro. So we have 3 sessions monthly. There's one in one of the neighboring counties, and the Samaritans down in Fall River, New Bedford also have grief support. So we're not talking about someone who is just recently in a loss situation. And we are also never talking about attempt survivors who are just coming out of crisis. Even though, and Tracey will confirm, we have had attempt survivors who say, I wish I had this when I was coming out of that. So that's where programs like Dee Dee Hirsch come in, and the others that are designed and specifically for attempt survivors coming out of crisis. So Trace, if I could start with you, when you finish with an R&R exercise with your crew, what are one of the most important things about that session? What are your takeaways from that?
That everyone is like on the same page with each other.
Oh, okay.
And that we feel more like there's a real connection there, and that we all understand one another and where we're coming from based off of our lived experience, and we're able to share like a lot of different things with one another.
Yep.
You know, and maybe, you know, too, how to even make it better. You know what I mean? Like how to improve our coping skills, and you know, and maybe we should talk more. You know, my biggest thing is bringing everybody to the table, like loss survivors, impacted family, attempt survivors, all of us. You know, I really believe that we can all benefit from one another just from listening to one another. You know, I believe that the loss survivors can heal from listening to us because of a lot of guilt that they may feel when they lost someone. You know, I feel like that we can be that voice for them to help them, maybe not, I don't want to say get over it, but maybe to heal their heart just a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, unfortunately, you know, a loss survivor saved my life. You know, and it really took that tragedy to make me realize that, my God, like, wow, like I really did that. I would have done that to my family, you know. And so I think it's important, you know, that we still continue to get together around the table and share our experience with one another.
Thank you, hon.
You're welcome.
Steve.
I want to piggyback right off of Tracey from there, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
So, you know, the community conversations for suicide prevention that we have, when I was asked if I could do that, I jumped at that. Of course, I was nervous about going in front of people and I speaking about my loss, and I still get emotional. And at first, it was really, really emotional. It was very tough. Sometimes it still is. but I went into it with thinking that hopefully me talking about my loss could have the same effect on somebody that, like Tracey was just saying, because she listened to a loss survivor, it helped her tremendously in her healing and trying to get herself better, and it was a motivating fact for her. And although I never thought I would hear somebody say it to me, it was the third one we had done, and we were up front and we were speaking, and I kept noticing this young woman. She kept turning and wiping away tears, and I knew there was some loss survivors there, and I kind of assumed that she was a loss survivor. Just every time I looked at her, she was turning, wiping away tears. So at the end of this conversation, people want to come up and talk to us, and this young woman approached me with her father, and she was 17 at the time, which is how old my daughter would have been. And with tears in her eyes, she was thanking me for sharing my story. Her father said she had a rough year that year. She'd survived an attempt. And she was telling me, she was thanking me. She says, I want to go to college for this. I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I don't want to do that to my family. And I'm pretty much sure that what we gave her that night is, I think we gave her a gift.
Yep.
Because we shared that with her. And
I
know
agree.
Absolutely.
Kathy?
So I'm just going to piggyback off of Steve and Tracey, but I mean, I remember when my sister died almost 20 years ago, my 70-year-old mother saying that we're going to talk about it. We're going to tell the truth about what happened in the hopes that it'll save one life. And so I never in a million years would have guessed that I'd be talking about it this much, but also the path that it's taken me on. And I think, if you're to ask me what do I think is, what has come out of this that's affected me personally the most, is that I feel now that by hearing the loss survivor story, but also the attempt survivor story, it does give us more factual information that can be used to help save lives. And so, I don't think that's what my mom necessarily had in mind when she said we're going to talk about it, but what a great path it's taken us on, because I do think it's important to know, the signs, to know what the right questions are to ask, and all of that came from sitting around a table with attempt survivors. And so to me, the work that we can save one other life, I just think has taken on a whole new meaning. And even Steve's project, the Casey Palm project, and all of that. I mean, all of this has come from just, tying up, putting everyone together around a table, and the common bond that we have is suicide. And it's not necessarily just a loss survivor or an attempt survivor. It's everyone that's affected by suicide working together to save the next life. And so that's what's mattered to me on this group.
Well, in a couple of minutes, we're going to be, hard to believe, but we're going to be talking about final thoughts. So before we do, I got a couple of messages in by text and asked for clarification. So what we're talking about when we talk about Steve and Kathy and Tracey speaking, it's been done in different formats. We've done it at conferences, we've done it at conventions, we've done it in workshops. We also do it in a form that we have used here in Bristol County for several years, and that's called the community conversation. And what we do is we take over a library or some hall, or we do something along those lines. And typically we have all three of our speakers. We also have Lisa Joe, who is a loss survivor, and she fills in sometimes when Kathy or Steve can't make it. And actually, that's part of what is so wonderful about the Re-Energize and Reconnect, and the people who come to us either through grief support or because they are attempt survivors and end up in the R&R room, is now we have a number of people. Lauren's been added to it, and so many others we have a wonderful group of people willing to go out and share not just their story of loss or attempt crisis, but of resilience, from everybody going from that trauma to resilience. And I know that's a kind of getting to be an overused word, but I keep coming back to a substantial improvement in the quality of life. That the pain, we know that the pain of a loss never goes away. You don't get over that, but there are moments that can lessen it. And when you see these three in action, and the laughter is banting back and forth, people pick up on that. They feel that positive energy. So that's how we do it. We it's not totally scripted. It's they just play off one another, and they're better off when they can play off one another, and it's not a rigid format. So another question that came out, well, how do you get one? Well, okay, that's another story altogether. If you're, as I said, in the Missouri area, you can go to Joplin. I just found out this summer just how big Missouri is, so I know that that's not an easy thing. But in Missouri, you could get a hold of Rick Straight, or Jackie Christmas. We trained a number of people this past summer to prepare to deliver these. Most of them are focusing right now on the impacted family member. Is this the night workshop series? And then we'll come back around to do the R&R. We talked at Frederick Community College about bringing that down to Maryland, not on campus because it's a community college. So the students would be floating in and out, but to base it in the community. And I think that's what's important. What I would like to know and hear from you all who are out there on the feed is there something else? I can't believe we're the only ones. That would be arrogant. But we would love to know who else is bringing this particular joint population, attempt survivors and loss survivors, further along the healing path into a consistent wellness check workshop, because that's what it's all about. You know, at any of our workshops, either a loss survivor and attempt survivor could have had a really bad week or a bad day. And we take time for that check-in. We do. But the exercises challenge us all to look at how we're dealing and interacting with other people. That is the key to life. But you come away with a sense of family, a sense of connection. And so I just wanted to just share, back channel me if you are really interested in bringing one of these to your locale. We can probably work that out some way or another. The workbook that we have is not open for distribution unless you are part of the workshop series. So it's not like the other book that we have. So I think at this point we have 6 minutes left. Isn't that great? That would be 2 minutes for each of you.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
That is awesome.
So, right.
I'll go first.
Sure, go right ahead, Trace.
Might as well, right? So if I had not listened to a loss survivor share her story, I might not have found my turning point and made a choice for life. I would not have experienced the joy of riding my motorcycle, riding in the wind, or seeing the Grand Canyon, or continuing to have an active role in the lives of my stepchildren and my step-grandchildren, or visited the homes of Jesse James and Billy the Kid because I love the West, or been a part of an honor guard with my Patriot Riders of America for the moving wall to honor the Vietnam vets. My gratitude list for a second chance at life is endless. I don't know if any of you had read Jane Goodall's Reason for Hope, but well after years of being told that I might consider reading it by guess who, the no fun lady, Goodall reflects on her story that she read in her childhood about a smaller bird riding on the back of an eagle, tucked inside its feathers, and that she too had done that through her life, that each feather represented people who had helped her along the way. I so identified with that. She went on to write that her eagle symbolizes the great spiritual power that supports us when our commitment and determination are put to the test. That this spirit and all the people the feathers represent can help us gain strength and new energy, even when we're at our most exhausted. And for me, this is a great example of what we take away from the R&R.
You're welcome. Was that a bow? Was that a bow?
That was a bow.
All right. Steve.
Listen to Tracey just speak now. Had I not found the kitchen table conversation for the grief support, I really don't know how far along I would be in my healing right now. The fact that I've learned a lot about myself, I've learned about Tracey and Kathy, and it's helped me with my healing. The fact that I can volunteer now and possibly help somebody out, even when it's grief support. Mm-hmm. I get inspired by Tracey's story when I hear her. She speaks from the heart when she talks about herself, and it's truly moving, and I know it's a tremendous help for others. I can look in some. I've looked in lost survivors' eye. I've talked to people who've lost children, and I can look in their eye and say, your child was not thinking what they would do to you, what it would do to you. There's not a lot of comforting words you can say to a lost survivor or someone who's lost a child, but that's just a little something that I can give them that I'm passing along from Tracey. You know, your child did not understand what they were going to do to you. They just didn't know, and it's. I'm glad I have that, and I'm glad I'm part of this.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Kathy.
So I'm gonna read the takeaways again because I think that kind of
sure
sums up how great I feel about working with these two. And so my hope is that we can bring lost survivors and attempt survivors together for several reasons. One, to help in the healing process for both sides, enlightening each other, helping each other to fill in some of the blanks, bring support to each other. Two, use the knowledge gained in support program education and training. Three, use the knowledge gained as a means to develop education and training around suicide prevention and awareness, starting as early as kindergarten. Four, work together to eliminate a lot of the myths that create much of the stigma that still exists.
Thank you, Kath. So as we wrap it up, everyone, we hope that tonight we could give you kind of a sense of how our conversation goes around our kitchen table when we come together for the Re-Energize and Reconnect Wellness Check workshops. We have attempt survivors, lost survivors, and we do at our table also have family members, impacted family members. So in this case, in this house, where we hold the meetings here, or the workshop meetings here, Tracey's wish comes true. We have the family, impacted family there, we have lost survivors, and we have attempt survivors all at the table together. I agree with her. I think that is one of the best methods we can put forward to stop suicide, to help reconnect the family. It isn't just about re-energizing, reconnecting the lost survivors and the attempt survivors. It's bringing the family connection back, because there probably is no better protective factor So this is who we are. This is what we do here in Bristol County. Thank you for joining us. We hope we'll see you next week. We're going to be talking about a really deep dive into some extraordinary self-care choices that some of our members have made. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Right.
That's a wrap.